No, I don't have the gavel or anything.
We can have water. up here.
Our mic's on. Should I move?
We can have water.
No.
I have
just move over
allergies, so
there.
I feel like water in my head.
Everything for you is here then, because you
It's not
won't
water,
have the,
any kind of drinks, I think
the
is.
draft. You'll have the actual.
One of those are actually.
Did your name come out? No, it was there. Is there a name on the floor over here?
No. That was strange. I saw it too.
Weird.
Where's Member Jones? Did she?
She was not able to make it.
Okay.
She's in therapy. Let her back.
I'm just gonna get started. I have no idea what that is. It slid out and we can't find it now.
Probably went flying in a.
Yeah.
I don't see it at all.
Did you by chance land in the trash can? Yeah, the little can right there?
No.
No?
All right, calling to order the work session. Does anybody have any opening business today? No?
We
No?
don't have it on the agenda, but I think for opening business right now, since we have some new board members, we should probably go with introductions all around with fellow board members and with staff. So maybe since you're chairing, you could start.
Okay, my name's Elizabeth Lemug. Don't really know how long I've been sitting on the board. It's at least been 3 years, or 2 or 3 years. This is my first time as a chairman, so be patient. I am an environmental engineer, so I try to bring that to the table for some of this. And that is a little bit about me. And we can start down here. Is it Jaleesa?
Yes, Jaleesa.
December 13th, 2020, you were appointed.
Oh, wow. Okay, so yeah. 3 years.
Coming up
Good
on an
evening,
anniversary.
everyone. My name is Jaleesa Collins. I've moved here about 4 years ago, retiring from the military. So politics, government, community involvement is the thing that I'm passionate about. So I saw this opportunity. I was happy I got it, and I'm ready to serve.
Okay. Excellent. Russell?
My name is Russell Alexander. I'm a lifetime resident. And I'm a bricklayer by trade, bricklayer and concrete. That's my specialty, so everything masonry.
Cool. All right, my name is Carolina Roddy. I moved to St. Cloud last year. And my husband and I, we've been going through like permitting things with the city, and the way that the city responded absolutely like blew me away. So I was like, okay, with that group of people, it's worthy to serve. And then Melissa was the one who said, you should get involved. And, you know, there's plenty of committees that need people. And what brought me here is I'm a psychiatrist, graduated 2 years ago.
Excellent. Trevor Estel, I'm a retired technical educator, mechanical educator. Now own a couple of entertainment venues in the downtown area. Not sure how long I've been here either. I kind of lose track after a while. 2 years, I think.
You were appointed on October 14th, 2021 was your appointment. So I think your first meeting was November of 2021.
Okay.
And I would say maybe Krizia next.
My name's Chrisia. I am the Historic Preservation Board Secretary. I've spoken to a couple of you already via email, introduced ourselves there. But yes, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I will be of service. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Virginia Befidia. I'm an associate planner, and along with my coworker Stephanie Streeter, we will be interchanging presenting historic preservation for you all.
You all are good. Tisha?
Hi, sorry, Tisha Manning, zoning manager, and I am the supervisor of Virginia and Stephanie, so I just sit and interact and answer questions.
Thanks, Tisha. And I'm Christine Dalton. I am the historic preservation consultant for the city. So just so the new board members know, how the workflow goes is it goes through Tisha, and Tisha will assign to staff members, and then I assist. So with meetings, and you'll see when we get into the regular meeting, that will have Virginia leading the actual agenda item that you guys are going to be looking at. So we do have some new business, but since we do have some new board members, I'm just going to briefly cover a couple of things that I think new board members should know. Because it's exciting to serve on a board, but sometimes you get on a board and you're like, what's my role here? And what the heck? You have a lot of questions, and sometimes no one ever thinks to let you guys know. And it's great because you're all three are new, so you're gonna be going through this all together. So basically, whenever I'm working with historic preservation boards, or especially new board members, the first thing I like to tell people is that you are not the Look Better board. So you're not the Look Better board. The title of the board is the Historic Preservation Board. So everything that you do is not about, is this going to look better? Is it going to be prettier? Is it going to be nicer? Is this good historic preservation practice? And so your basis for making all your decisions is in the ordinance. So it's city ordinance that we have for historic preservation. So you'll want to become familiar with that ordinance. While we go through this work session, we're going to actually talk about the HPB notebooks. So last month, the board members actually got printouts of materials that we're putting in reference notebooks. So they've been reviewing that and supposed to make comment on that tonight. But you'll also get a copy of those. So Crizio will send it to you if she hasn't already digitally.
They have
That-
it also.
Okay, you have seen it. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but it has all different kinds of materials that would affect you as board members. So one thing I would say to look at, of course, is the ordinance and get familiar with the ordinance, but also something called Robert's Rules of Order. So if you have never served on like a municipal board before, or maybe a nonprofit board, if you have experience serving on a nonprofit board, most meetings are run under what's called Robert's Rules of Order, and it's a process for running meetings so that there's stability in that process from meeting to meeting. If you meet on something and it goes to city council, you have followed a meeting process that city council can understand, that citizens can understand, and all of that. So there's a whole process by which you would make a motion or second a motion or have discussion and all of that. And so I know, being new, if you haven't served in this capacity before, board members usually tend to sit back for a little while and kind of watch the other board members. That's good, but I would also make sure that when you get back home and you're looking through that packet, you pay attention to your ordinance and Robert's Rules of Order. So I'm going to run through the HPB notebook with you, and one of the things that we were going to talk about tonight was the HPB bylaws, but we have actually a couple of board members who are not present, who are the ones that asked for us to review those bylaws. So I think since they were the ones to ask, that we should probably just push the bylaws to the next meeting and have that discussion. So I think if that's okay, that we're gonna go ahead and bypass that part of looking at it. And then the last thing that we're gonna look at tonight, which is item C under new business, is the annual report to city council. So, okay, make their suggestions at the next meeting. Okay, so Tisha wants me to walk through the bylaws with you. So you don't have a copy in front of you. I'm gonna read through that for you.
They have a copy. Everybody has a copy.
They
of
do
the
have a
bylaws.
copy in front of them. Oh, okay, you guys are ahead. Okay, so we'll do that. And then you have the annual report. Your ordinance actually requires the Historic Preservation Board to present an annual report to City Council. So City Council can be up to date on what you all have been doing for the past year. So we are looking at getting that on the City Council agenda for December. So presentation to City Council by December. So right about now is the time to look at that, review it together, make comments, and that way staff can kind of, finalize the details and then get it on that agenda for City Council presentation. Does that all make sense so far?
So far.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with the HPB notebooks, which you've gotten digitally. And the contents in the notebooks is, we started with the contact information for all of the board members. So it lists contact phone number, address, when they were nominated and when they served on the board. Sometimes board members forget, like, have I been on the board 3 years or 4 years? So that's just a quick reference for you. That will be updated to recognize the new board members tonight. The next thing that we have in the notebook that we will go over next is the HPB bylaws. So you do have an ordinance, but then you also have bylaws that are specific to your board. They're very brief. I think this is, maybe 3 pages, 4 pages. So we'll go over that. The next thing in your notebook is the ordinance that I was referencing. So as you look through those materials, I want you to read through the ordinance. Now, there's a lot of things in that ordinance. It starts out with the purpose and intent, why the board exists, basically. St. Cloud's a historic community, right? So, and St. Cloud is concerned with protecting its historic resources. And usually that protection of historic resources doesn't happen naturally. Usually you have to dictate some things about that. St. Cloud is kind of in its early days of having historic districts. And with the ordinances, just so you all know, it's not uncommon for communities to outgrow their ordinance and then kind of change their regulations. And so a lot of communities, if they've been practicing historic preservation at the local level for 30 years or even 40 years, like a Charleston or Savannah, they may have gone through like 10 ordinances already or even more. So the idea is, as your public, your citizens get used to being regulated like that, you can bring it to the next level of preservation. So a lot of cities will start out with kind of a starter ordinance that's a little bit vague, which you'll find your ordinance is a small ordinance. I mean, some municipalities, their historic preservation ordinance is like 80 pages. Yours is not. So it's for new board members, that's going to be easy for you to review and look through. The major part of your ordinance that there's 2 sections in your ordinance that I'm going to call your attention to, and I'll briefly explain. One is the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. So St. Cloud's ordinance is based on what we call the Secretary of the Interior standards. So historic preservation in our country is under the Department of the Interior. So a lot of times you'll hear the National Park Service is linked with historic preservation. The standards, preservationists kind of jokingly refer to them as the 10 commandments because they're 10 standards. So, and they say things, like you shouldn't sandblast a building, or if a building was in one use, you should try to keep it in the same use that it was originally in. So there's different details in those standards about. You should look at it more of like a preservation approach, how you're approaching things. And I'm not going to go through each one of these because it's not a training on that, but I want you to pay special attention to those because as you'll see when we go into the meeting and staff is going through the staff report, all the comments in the staff report are either going to be based on the Secretary of the Interior Standards section of your ordinance, or they're going to be based on the additional criteria section of the ordinance. And within that additional criteria section, that's going to call out things like an addition should have similar scale and massing of surrounding properties. So think about context in a historic district. If you have, little single family home and somebody wants to build like a 3-story house right next door, that would throw off the context a bit. So that additional criteria section is going to deal with a lot of things like scale, massing, how windows line up, how doors line up. So if you could think like a thoroughly modern construction, the windows might be here and there, but in historic architecture, they may be, really have a certain pattern to them as far as like where they're placed, how tall they are, how wide they are. More modern construction, the windows are a lot wider. On older buildings, they're more narrow. So looking at things like scale and massing. And for new construction, this is also something that I like to underscore to new board members. When you're looking at new construction, you're not trying to force people to create fake old buildings. That is what we call creating a false sense of history. So what you want to do for infill development, if you ever get any cases for infill development, is you want to look at, are the materials in character with the existing materials, so there's some compatibility there. Are door and window openings lining up? But you're not forcing people to create like this fake Disney thing. That's not what we're going for. Again, you're the Historic Preservation Board, so you want things that are in character, scale, massing, all of that's going to be important. So look at those two sections. And I think that Jay is recording this, so if you need to go back and reference the meeting, like she said something in the meeting and I don't remember, you'll have that. I think it's posted on their YouTube channel. If not, Krizia can get you a link to view it if it's not posted online.
Can I interrupt for real quick?
Yep.
I accidentally gave her my notebook already. I was going
Okay.
to say, if you want to give that, I can actually, so they can just see what we're talking about.
Glance at it. Okay.
Yeah.
When you say
Do you have it
Yeah.
to pass it
I
down?
accidentally-
That's perfect. So I'm not going to go over the ordinance anymore. I told you the important things to look at. The next thing that you'll want to get familiar with in your notebook is we have what we call a major and minor review chart. And the board members who are sitting here may remember, we worked on this major and minor review chart at the beginning of the year, where we looked at the old chart and we had a whole discussion about, is this good for a major review? Can we change this to a minor review? So you understand what these terms mean. A major review on a certificate of appropriateness. So when somebody's coming to the board and asking for permission to do something on their property, it's always going to be, purview is limited to the exterior of the building. So the ordinance does not cover interiors. So that would be building department. So it's not that they don't need a permit, they just don't need this certificate of appropriateness application. So any property that's within the historic district, even if it's new construction, is going to require what's called a certificate of appropriateness. The major reviews are the certificate of appropriateness that comes before you as a board. The minor reviews are the certificates of appropriateness that staff will process internally. So there's different lead times in those. If it's a minor review and staff is processing, obviously it's faster turnaround. And those are for more minimal things. Say somebody's repairing masonry and the way that they're going about it, we've looked at, it's fine, we'll go ahead and process that, and then they could get the building permit. In the district, they should not be getting a building permit unless they have the certificate of appropriateness first. So in the district, that's always like the first step. So this one here is the major and minor review chart. So this is something that the board could reference or property owners can reference and say, if I'm proposing work to my property, is this going to be something that staff might review, or is this going to be something that is going to get sent to the board? I have had property owners that we've worked with that come to us with these really intense plans that are a major review, and I look at some of this stuff and I'm like, wow, we're going to have to recommend denial. No property owner wants to go into a board meeting with a recommendation of denial because they're going in from this fighting stance. So a lot of times we'll meet with the property owner and say, the things that you're proposing are really intense for a historic building. Why don't you consider this approach? And so a lot of times it's information gathering, like, what are you really trying to achieve here with your building? Is it aesthetic? Is it structural? And so once we can find out a little bit more information, sometimes they do modify their plans and what they've submitted. So we have seen where initially something might be a major review, and after working it through with them, then they walk out with a minor review and like 3-day turnaround. So sometimes that happens, but just look at that chart and know what kinds of things are under major review, because that's going to familiarize you to what you're actually going to be looking at in future meetings. So just as an example, if an accessory building is over 800 square feet, that's going to come to the board. If it's under 800 square feet, staff can review it. But 800, you're starting to get into a little bigger, square footage. Another example is demolition, a non-historic addition. So say somebody added an addition on a building 40 years ago before we had preservation standards, and it's really not in character or anything. It's not doing anything for the historic nature of the building. That would be something that staff could look at and say, well, it's not part of the original historic building. It's not over 50 years. So we'll allow that non-historic addition to be removed without sending it to the Historic Preservation Board. So just look at that chart. The other thing that you'll want to get familiar with is the actual application form, because people may come to you knowing you're a board member and it's like, what do I do with this and why are they asking that? So knowing what your forms actually look like is always good practice. So, of course, property owners may come to you knowing that you're on the Historic Preservation Board, and you could give them feedback, but usually the best course of action is to direct them to staff. Staff can help you with that. If you have any questions after staff has helped you, let me see if I could get involved. You don't want to have too much involvement with a property owner outside of a meeting, because then if they come and have to present at the meeting, then you have to disclose all the communication you've had with them and all of that. So it's better to keep them, you want to be friendly and you want to be helpful, but you can be friendly and helpful and still direct them to staff and have it flow through the proper channels, if that makes sense. So that COA application also has a couple of pages of submittal requirements. So it actually walks through in checklist format what you're applying for, what you have to submit. So if they just fill out a form and they say, I'm building an addition on my house here, what's wrong with that? I don't have anything to look at, right? So if they want to do an addition, they'll see in this checklist that they have to have elevation drawings, they have to be dimensioned, this, that, and the other. And that way, we avoid what happens very commonly, where somebody will fill out an application form, submit it, it's incomplete, and then 3 days later, they're complaining to a city council member that staff is not doing anything. So that could be very frustrating. It's like, well, you didn't really submit an application. You may have filled out a piece of paper and given it to us, but if you didn't give us all this, you have an incomplete application. So just take a look at that, because the more that you know about the experience of an applicant coming to you, the more you can make suggestions to staff on how we could streamline things. The best buy-in in historic preservation is if you could make things streamlined and don't make it too much of a hassle for property owners, because that's the worst. When they start feeling like this is a huge hassle and I don't want to do it, they just shut down on every aspect of it. So we are trying to tweak things as we go and upgrade them and modify them, make them more streamlined. But you all may have different experience, or you said you had a great permitting experience. There may be something that you experienced where you're like, oh, we can incorporate that into this process. So your opinion, even though you're new board members, your opinion is very important. Don't be shy, okay? So let's see, the next thing in your notebook, there's 2 programs that the city launched this year. They launched it in May. May is National Historic Preservation Month, so they launched it to coincide with National Historic Preservation Month. The programs are in collaboration with St. Cloud Main Street, which is a nonprofit in town that does some partnering on projects with the city. So the first program is a historic plaque program. So property owners can pay a fee to have a cast bronze plaque fabricated and affixed to their historic building. If a property has been determined to be contributing to the historic district, they are eligible for a plaque. If their property is non-contributing, they are not eligible for a plaque. So they do have to pay the fee for getting the plaque made, and it does have to go through the board. They get looked at 1 time a year, so applications are due by February of each year in order to get a plaque by May, and the plaques are given out during an annual ceremony with the city council members there, city leadership, historic preservation board members, and they make it like a nice community event in honor of historic preservation. So that's the plaque program. And if you pass around the booklet, I think there's a design of what the plaque looks like. Yep, there's a plaque design in there, so. The other program that's really exciting is the awards program. So with historic preservation, you think about the time, the money, the emotional energy that people put into rehabbing their properties. We want to make sure that they're being recognized for good preservation practice. So that's part of your job as board members, is to have your eyes and ears open in the community to see, do I know so-and-so around the corner is working on their house? Are they doing a good job? Or there's some things they're doing questionable. They might be outside the historic district. So the plaque and awards program, you don't have to be in the historic district. You just have to have a historic house in St. Cloud. So there may be something that's, 1.5 miles out that's historic that you know about that may not be on your fellow board members' radar, but it's on your radar. And if they know that there's potential to get a historic preservation award, sometimes that shifts people's project approach because they're like, well, I might do a little bit more because I really want that award. Some people are really award motivated. So that is a program because the city really does want to recognize when people are, you know, committed to these historic buildings, recognize the effort, the energy, the expense, the patience required with historic buildings. So those are two exciting programs that were launched this year. The applications for those will be given to the Historic Preservation Board as an informational kind of item. I mean, you'll still get to vote on it, but it's more like you're looking at it and you're agreeing, yes, this meets the criteria. So it's kind of, but that'll be one time a year. So the deadline for the applications are in February. So it's anticipated that either your March or April meeting is when you'll be looking at those, and then probably your March meeting in order to fabricate the plaques on time, because there's about a 6-week lead time. So you'll look at those and say, yay or nay, this building is going to get a plaque, or we think that this property is totally worthy of an award. The committee for this project is actually not HPB, because think about it, if a property owner is coming before you and then they're coming with this, like that, there could be some conflict there. So you're not actually having a role in like picking an award winner, but the city is and Main Street are still interested in your feedback. The awards committee is made of 2 employees from the city, 2 employees from Main Street, and then a last neutral party at the city's choosing. So for now, as the preservation consultant, I've been serving in that capacity. In the future, it could be somebody different, but it's a 5-member team who picks on the awards, okay? And you've actually had a couple of projects that have come before HPB this past year that, if executed according to their designs, are complete, not just local potential award winners, but potentially statewide award winners, if those projects get executed according to the renderings and all of that. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, the next thing in the notebook, and stop me if you have any questions about anything so far. I know I'm flying through some stuff here. Are we good? The next thing in your notebook is definitions. That's something that you definitely want to become familiar with is, you know, when we're talking about things and we use the word COA, what does COA mean? COA is an abbreviation for a certificate of appropriateness. When we refer to something as being non-contributing or contributing, what does that mean? So non-contributing and contributing is basically the property has been analyzed by a professional to say, does it contribute to the historic character or not? And the professional who's analyzing that, that's usually done through a survey. So in 2020, St. Cloud had a survey done by a consultant who looked at everything and said, contributing, non-contributing. That evaluation is done according to national criteria. And forms called Florida Master Site File forms are completed, and the state reviews them. So it's not just one person's opinion. It's not just the consultant's opinion. It goes through many different channels to determine contributing or non-contributing status on a building. But just become familiar with the definitions in here. One thing that St. Cloud has that's really exciting is that St. Cloud is a Florida certified local government. And the Certified Local Government Program is for preservation programs that have had approved ordinances. The great benefit about being what we call a CLG is that at the time of year when everybody's running around applying for grants, there is a grant called the Small Matching Grant, and it gives an award up to $50,000. If a community is a certified local government, they do not have to match. That means they could get $50,000 without having the city to pull any money out of their pockets, which is, you know, you could do some really great projects. This year, the city actually got a grant award for $50,000, and St. Cloud Main Street got an award for $50,000. And since St. Cloud Main Street is within a community that has a CLG, neither of those grants required a match. So essentially, there's $100,000 that was granted to St. Cloud for projects without any kind of money coming out locally, which is fantastic. So, you know, you could look at the rest of the definitions. There's a definition there for the Secretary of the Interior Standards. Be sure to look at that. The next thing in your notebook, I talked about Robert's Rules of Order. And that's kind of conducting yourselves during the meeting. One of the things, and I know you guys have heard me talk about this a lot, is I always say legally defensible decisions. So think about it. You're sitting up here and you're a board and you're making decisions about people's private property. So that has to do with private property rights. So it's a legal thing that you're doing up here. So you want to make sure that you're making decisions that are legally defensible. Do we have board members on the record sitting there the whole time saying, I like the color pink better? That's not legally defensible. You know, or I like this better, or it's my opinion this, or it's my opinion that. When you're making legally defensible decisions, you're actually pointing to the ordinance and saying, hey, right here in our ordinance, it says this, and this is why we're making this decision. And you'll see when we get into the actual regular meeting and you're going through the agenda item, you'll see how that agenda item is crafted, and it actually specifically calls out the things in your ordinance verbatim. So that way, if somebody's aggrieved by a decision you make and they decide to go out and hire an attorney and take it up with the city, then the city's got everything, you know, all their ducks in a row. I always also talk to the board members about how important motions are, that when you make a motion, sometimes you get a complicated case and there's all kinds of pressure, the applicant's waiting here, you know, don't get stressed out. If you have to actually ask the board chair, can we recess for like 5 or 10 minutes? I need to get my brain around this. That's totally appropriate for you to do so. So feel free to do so. Don't be shy. I mean, don't do it on every item, you know, and it is a public meeting. So if you call a recess, you're not going outside the room and behind closed doors. You know, you're kind of, usually the recess, you'll be maybe talking one-on-one with staff, not your fellow board members. And that's something that Crizia will probably go over with you. Being a board member of a board in Florida, Florida has what we call the Sunshine Law. So things have to happen in the sunshine. So if you all see each other and you're out to eat and it's lunchtime and it's, you know, the meeting's in 2 days and you got your packet, you know, don't go to Member Lamug and say, hey, what do you think about this item that's coming before us in 2 days? That's actually not legal. So you can talk to staff all day long. If you see something on an upcoming agenda and you're like, I really have a lot of questions about this and I don't want to ask the questions during the meeting because I don't want to put anybody on the spot, that's where you talk to staff. So, but talking to your fellow board members, that's a no-no.
Christine, may I add one more thing to that?
Yes.
Please do not use the reply all on your
Yes.
emails.
That happens
That-
sometimes.
That has happened previously, and
Yeah.
we don't want that to happen again.
There was a chat about a case. Let's just put it that way. But,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it does happen. People make mistakes, and just the immediate course of action is for somebody to say, hey, everybody, remember, don't reply all. We're not supposed to be talking to each other, and shut it down as soon as it happens, which is what happened in this case. It didn't continue on. But, you know, that everything is public record. So even if you're sitting here and you're doodling during the meeting, at the end of the meeting, Chrissy is going to say, I need your paper. It's public record. So just make sure that, you know, how you conduct yourself, and just always put yourself in the applicant's shoes. You know, how would you want them to be speaking about your case? You know, would you want them to be subjective, or would you want them to actually cite in black and white where you're actually getting your information from? So just think about that. And Robert's Rules of Order is going to give you a lot of information. Usually if you're following Robert's Rules of Order and you're not being the Look Better board, you're going to have no problems. You'll be making legally defensible decisions. One thing I will add to that, because I did start talking about motions. Motions are very important. You could have a meeting where you all could sit here and talk about something for 3 hours, and you could come to a decision in your discussion. If it is not in the motion, it does not matter. What you want to stand at the end of your discussion with each other when you're looking at a case has to be in your motion. Otherwise, it's not legal. That's your final finding on the matter, is the motion and approval of the motion. That's what goes into the meeting minutes. So, you know, you could say to an applicant, but, you know, we talked about it. I had one where we were in another city where we were working with a developer. And there was supposed to be a trade of property. This was discussed. It was kind of complicated. We sat there and hashed it out over almost 3 hours. The next day, I went into the city manager's office to meet with the city attorney and talk to the property owner about conveyance of this parcel of land. And the city attorney was like, your board members never said it in the motion. Look at the motion. I have the motion right here. It was already transcribed. They talked about it for over almost 3 hours, but it wasn't in the motion. So that whole project just like imploded in itself because the property was never transferred. The developer actually afterwards said, well, if you want to buy it for like 200 grand, and it was supposed to be a trade for the approval that they were issuing. So that just tells you how important your motions are. So again, when you're making them, don't get stressed, don't get freaked out. It's just a part of doing the business, and sometimes you just got to take a deep breath and even write things down you all have had some complicated motions recently where you've had to do that, write it down and all that, so. And of course, always look to your more experienced board members in the beginning. They've been doing this for a while, so they know. The next thing in your notebook is just some marketing materials, so take a look at those. And then the last is the preservation map. So we have a local historic district and a National Register historic district. Your local historic district is what your ordinance is tied to. So anything within that local historic district is regulated by the ordinance. The National Register historic district, where that is actually important, is the contributing and non-contributing properties. The contributing properties could actually have access to federal rehabilitation tax credit if they're commercial or income producing. The two district boundaries are a little bit different. I could go into that for a whole other hour, but staff will have to explain to you why if you have any questions. So with the notebooks, what we're looking for is feedback on things that you think need to be added to the notebooks, or if you have any questions about anything in the notebooks. Crizzy is going to print the notebooks, and they will be here for you at the meetings. You'll have a digital copy to reference outside of the meetings. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, I was a little bit more thorough since you guys are new board members, so let me jump to bylaws real quick, just being mindful of the time. So Crizzy has said that you do have the bylaws in front of you. So they're pretty straightforward if you read through them. The name of your board is the Historic Preservation Board. Your membership has been outlined in your ordinance. Your board has 7, is it total? 8? Yeah. So, and the purpose of the bylaws is just how your board is organizing your business, including the processing of applications, like I talked to you about COA applications, designations of buildings, and you're also tasked with identifying, taking inventory of all assets of a historic nature within St. Cloud. So even though you're looking at cases that are in the historic district, you should be keeping your eyes peeled citywide of historic buildings. Even if they're not under the ordinance, it's important for the city to have on their radar certain activities. We know a significant building is going to get demolished. It's not in the district, so you can't stop demolition, but maybe you could photo document the building before it goes down. So there are different things that you could do to capture that. So just keep an eye on that. Preservation plan. So this is one of the things in the bylaws that says the HPB shall review any changes to the historic preservation plan, which will be presented to City Council. You all don't have a preservation plan. So this is one of those things where the other board members who have asked, let's take a look at the bylaws, is like trying to be consistent. Meeting frequency, it says here 6 times a year. Your board has actually been meeting 10 times a year. So been taking off July and December. So 10 meetings a year. So we talked about the potential for that changing. The 6 times a year here was, at that time, what they thought was appropriate. They just had the regular meetings. They weren't doing any work sessions at that time. The board's been doing work sessions for about 2 years now to get work other than the cases. So, some historic preservation boards, how they're operating is all they're doing is property owner applies to do something to their building. The board sits up there, discusses, makes votes. that's what you're doing when you're strictly just doing regular meetings. If you're a board who's actually doing work sessions, you're actually getting to work on special projects like the plaques and awards program, like updating all your application forms and your submittal documents to make it more streamlined for customers. So you're doing projects outside of just making decisions on people's property. So quorum, we need to have a quorum in order for the proceedings to happen and for you all to vote. So if we don't have a quorum, then we essentially don't really have a meeting. So it's important, and that's, your board secretary will always check in with you in advance of the meeting. Hey, can you let me know if you're going to make the meeting or not? That gets into another thing in your bylaws, which talks about attendance. So of course, if you get chosen, appointed to the HPP, and then you're supposed to actually come and you don't, then of course you could get removed from the board. So that is talked about in the bylaws. Item C talks about your agendas. So you'll see it actually lists the sequence of how the meeting is supposed to go, and that matches up with the agenda that we have. The location of the meeting is posted. You all have a chair and a vice chair. So the chair leads the meeting, roll call, all of those things, which you'll see tonight with Member Lamug chairing, and we have a vice chair. So if the chair is not able to make it, then the vice chair will take that up. So, and then if both of those can't make it, then we would look to the board secretary, and she'd see the order of your appointments and then would make a suggestion about who should chair the meeting. If somebody is not feeling up to chairing the meeting, like physically or something, they could say, I'd rather somebody else chair the meeting, but usually the sequence is going to be chair or vice chair, and then the order of how they were appointed. For all normal action, the board shall vote verbally by roll call from secretary. That's in there. And this gets into that under 7 voting where it says B, reconsideration. This is getting into a little bit of what I was talking about with Robert's Rules of Order, that there's a way that you should reconsider a motion. So you want to follow that process. So if the board makes a vote and then there's one member who's like, yeah, I don't really feel comfortable with the way that went down, I want this relooked at, then you got to open it back up. And there's a certain way to do that legally to make sure that you're kind of crossing your T's and dotting your I's. C is an important one. It says abstentions. So if you have a true conflict, you have a financial interest in a project. Say a member still has one of his entertainment venues and he's going to be redoing the building. Should he be sitting up there voting on his own building? He has a financial stake in that project. So that would be a situation where he should abstain. And so he would state, I need to abstain from this, and this is the reason why I have a financial interest. You can't abstain just because your neighbor's coming before you don't want to be the bad guy. That's not a cause for abstaining. So some board members are like, wow, I really want to abstain from this because my neighbor's going to be upset with me if I vote a certain way. It's going to ruin our relationship. That's not a reason for abstaining. Yes.
My question was, what if it's a spouse or like a parent?
That would be probably more of a question to get into ahead of time at the meeting and talk to staff about, because there are some situations where even if it is a spouse, spouse I think is a different story. Tisha might be able to comment on that. But like a parent, is there an interest with a spouse? There might be financial. Usually do you have some kind of financial gain that you could get from that? So sometimes you do have to ask staff if you know ahead of time, which if something's going to impact you ahead of time. If your spouse or your parent is coming, you would ask that question ahead of time, and they'd be able to ask the city attorney, should they abstain or not, so you could get direction then. But normally you have some true conflict, like you have financial gain from it. So ex parte communications, that's what I was talking about, where if you have communication with a property owner and then they come to the meeting, now it is your responsibility as a board member to say, I've had these conversations, this is what we discussed, this is the feedback I gave them, and that's why it's just easier. You may not remember everything that you said to them, and then you're on the hook for it. So, just disclosing that if you have had conversations, but if somebody, again, starts talking to you about something, just always direct them to staff. Workshop voting, so with these work sessions or workshops, sometimes there are items that you all are looking at, like when we were updating the major and minor review chart, that would be something that you all would look at where then in the regular meeting, you want to vote on it. So your work session is just time for discussing things. You're not actually taking any legal action in work sessions. So that's what that's telling right there, is that if you do have an item that you want to take action on that you've discussed in the work session, that you're going to actually take that action in the regular meeting. And city council presentation. So each year, if you're doing an annual report to your city council, the board chair should be there to answer any questions. So basically, the board chair is the representative, then the vice chair, second, and so on. And maintenance of bylaws is exactly what we're doing right now. We're just looking at them and seeing how we may want to modify them or, give them the blessing as is and all of that. So just look at these, and once you've had a chance to really look at them and digest them, you can give your comments to your board secretary in email, and just don't copy your fellow board members on that. Do you have any questions about the bylaw section?
No, the only question I had is where do you find those major and minor review tables?
They're in your HPB notebook.
Okay.
So that digital copy that you got, it's in there. Yeah, all of those, the application forms are in there, the maps are in there, everything should be in there. If you find that there's something you think should be in there and you're not seeing it, let Chrissy know, and
Okay.
they can incorporate it in there.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. I have 8 minutes if we go right up to 6.
We have public waiting downstairs as well. They're locked out.
Oh, we need to make sure that gets addressed. So real quick, I did mention that you all have an annual report to do to the city council. So if, Chrissy, I think you already provided a copy of the annual report to them. If you do not already have a copy of that report, Chrissy is going to get a copy to you. But I am just going to go over real quick. We do have time because it's not planned to present that to city council until December. So she'll send that to email, and you can even comment on it next month. So if there's something, again, in the annual report that you think should be in there and it's not, or something in the annual report that you want to modify, now's basically the time to start reviewing that material. So in the annual report, let me just pull it up here. Did you print out a copy of the annual report, Rubia? No. If I can find it real quick. So there's 2 annual reports that you all do. One is you have to do an annual report to the city council, so the city council is up to speed on what you all are doing. But another is to the state, what we call the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, to maintain your certified local government status. So I'm going to talk about one report right now, and then we're actually going to talk about the other report. You all will be talking about that at your November meeting. What I'm actually going to suggest, since we're running close on time and we want to make sure for the applicants that we start the meeting on time, is if I can go over the content of the annual report at the end of the regular meeting, if that's okay with the board chair, in the interest of time, because
I'm okay
right
with
now
that.
I'll have to fly through it in 3 minutes.
No, I'm okay with waiting.
That'll also maybe give an opportunity for Chrissy to print a copy. Do you think you'd have time to print a copy? potentially?
Sure. While the meeting's going, you want me to run down
Or,
the annual report, one for each?
or you could just do a copy for me.
Just one copy?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Virginia.
Actually, if I could find it on here and plug in my computer and make sure it doesn't die, then we don't need a copy. Does she know which one it is?
I'm sorry?
Does she know which one it is?
Yeah, she was CC'd in all your emails.
It's the one to City Council, Virginia. Okay, so having said that, I just want to make sure that we start our regular meeting properly at 6. So in the last 2 minutes here, do you all, I know I went through that really quickly, so do you all have any questions about anything?
No, you did a great job.
Thank you.
I was taking notes.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, you can always go back and listen to the audio if there's something you're like, I kind of know what she was talking about. Let me go back. And of course, staff, as always, if there's anything that you have any questions, that they're going to be able to help you.
And I just want to let you guys, before the meeting starts, since the agenda, the full packet was over 20 pages, what I did was print them front and back. So the next meeting, if you just flip your paper over, that's going to be the next agenda.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, I think.
Good. Does anybody have any old business before we finish up? Okay, and any comment from the public? Nope. And individual board comments. Jaleesa, any comments? Russell?
No.
No.
No. Okay, our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 14th, at 5 PM, and that is the end of this meeting.